pick some bans or maybe just not lose a fight at 30 minutes, since apparently you're not allowed to do that anymore.
I will say it is rather unfortunate because we didn't get to see a whole lot out of Oceans on that Scylla.
Yeah.
We saw a ton of Anderster's Raw, but I mean, that's kind of what you expect. We know that Anderster is going to play one hell of a Raw. It's just, that's his god. It's his bread and butter. And it just didn't seem like they were able to connect the dots on ALG with the Scylla. And I think that that's also partially due to the fact that ALG never really had a team fight until that last one.
That's a good point. There never really was the big 5-on-5 team fight. We did see several picks. The kill count overall was very low, but when that team fight did happen, it goes the way of Space Station, and Space Station do want to see that Fafnir one more time, so they first pick it out. ALG feel like taking Met Yankee on that Kernos, though. It
might not be Met Yankee on the Kernos, though. This could potentially be another more comfort pick of the double ADC composition that we've seen out of Allegiance. Kronos is still on the table, so is Freya and Sol. Wouldn't be surprised because both Oceans and Met Yankee are very solid on those gods.
And Met Yankee in particular was a big part of that last game for them, using the Kernos to steal away those Gold Furies when Space Station Gaming were occupied elsewhere on the map. So that's an option they'll have available. They do go ahead and pick up the Hu Yi one more time, and now they got Nemesis in the jungle for them.
And I actually really love this Nemesis selection for Space Station because look at what ALG just secured. It was the Ganesh, and with the Ganesh and Erlang Shen, you already know that's enough presence for a tanky frontline that you're going to want a god that can shred through them. And what better god for that than Nemesis?
That's what Nemesis does. Her ultimate literally just makes them less tanky. So that's an option they'll have. Space Station Gaming choosing to ban out the Awelix here. Maybe just worried about that coming from the jungle?
Awelish and Serket are two gods that Weekend feels very comfortable on, and they are just two pretty known picks for him as far as assassins are concerned. So better for Space Station to eliminate the Awelish, considering that they have that Hu Yi with the jump, the Fafnir with the jump, and they don't want to find their carries or their support being put out of position unnecessarily.
Feels like ALG wants to run back this game, though. They've chosen to put Oceans back on the Scylla in the mid lane for him, and Space Station take Raijin, who they've been seeing a lot more of lately.
And Raijin, for good reason, he does a lot of damage, which is exactly what Anderster loves to do, is damage. I mean, just look at that last game and his raw performance, but also the Camazotz, which leads me to believe this could potentially be the Nemesis solo lane, which wouldn't surprise me. That seems like something Scary D would certainly like to play.
Yeah, Scary D taking Nemesis to the solo lane could certainly be a possibility, but very likely we're going to see this Unboss that was just locked in for ALG go into the jungle, so we can take in that Unboss to do sort of what he likes to do best, which I think is just set up the rest of his team to do well.
But the problem here is that ALG could fall victim from that. I wouldn't call it cheesy, but it's an insane amount of pressure coming from a Nemesis and Camazotz.
Yes.
Homefe was already applying so much pressure onto Cyclone Spin in match number 1, so I can't even begin to imagine how much worse that's going to get. And no, it'll be a little bit of a switch around. Scary D actually on the Camazotz, but still the same concept in mind.
And Scary D with the Camazotz is going to have a lot of sustain there in that lane, so that makes some sense as far as solo laners are concerned, but grouping up as 5 as Space Station invading the jungle one more time, looking for Cyclone Spin, and this time they do commit the sprint right away, and Cyclone Spin even uses the shell at the last moment, so that's going to be on cooldown for another 145 seconds. Space Station picking up first blood.
And it went straight to Anderster with the 400 gold bounty. That's a pretty big bounty for a game not having even started yet.
That's rough for ALG, and the thing we were talking about at the start of this game too was that after you lose a 30-minute game in an instant, there is a bit of a potential for a tilt, and then when you give up first blood before the minions even meet too, that's something that can just add even further to the frustration. So Cyclone Spin, the veteran, looking to keep everything still positive over there for him and go into this matchup with a clean mindset.
Just look at that pressure from Homefe and Scary D, already fully aggressing onto Cyclone, not wanting to let him in weak and clear out this solo wave, and for good reason. Scary D and Homefe have the advantage here, actually forcing Cyclone Spin to dash away with the 72 transformations back to his tower line.
And again, that's what he's taking first, so he doesn't have the pen available for him. It is some decent clear that he can have there in that wave, but I don't know if that's something he would prefer to take or if he had to because of the aggression that he was under, as Space Station do come and take those elementals.
They don't feel comfortable, however, venturing into Allegiance's jungle and looking for the speed and blue buffs, at least not yet. Instead, Anderster actually getting pinned down by Oceans and Neilma, but he'll be just fine, although missing 75% of his health.
Good follow-up immediately from Oceans off the dash in from Neyruma. So they're able to get some good poke out. And as you said, Space Station just going to back up and get their own jungle, confirm that bit of farm while they can. Allegiance, though, want to rotate over and try and contest the oracles that Zapman are trying to pull up. Ricochet actually ends up hitting Neyruma too, so he does have to back up and only settle for one.
Mild style play, but one is all that Zap needs just to ensure that ALG won't be able to secure both of those and have the ward vision over him for free. Plus, he doesn't really miss anything from the wave. That's always a bonus.
Able to get back there and start tagging that wave, but Med Yankee, knowing that those oracles already been tagged, was just hanging out the tower line, trying to establish some pressure. Looks like ALG were able to secure their bus on the solo lane side. Now they're going back and just getting those back harpies. So Space Station, despite that early game lead, aren't trying to play too far forward. They don't want to give anything back after what they were able to take early.
I wouldn't be surprised if Zapman tried wrapping back around to that remaining oracle and securing it just to see if he'll also get that ward vision in place, although wanted to just push up that wave as hard as possible now that Met Yankee has already taken the time to back to pick up tier 2 boots.
Now, what does Space Station Gaming have to do to make sure they can capitalize on the double assassin comp that they have, since they don't have that frontliner you normally get from solo?
This is exactly what they need to do. Just put Homefei and Scary D together. It worked in game number 1, and if it's not broke, don't fix it. Weaken, although he can help out Cyclone a large amount, having that Fear No Evil to cause some chaos in case Homefei and Scary D do commit, it's still going to be incredibly difficult for him and Cyclone to out-damage the burst possibilities from Scary D and Homefei. Plus, they have such a heavy commit potential with that Camazot's ultimate.
Homefei and Jig's able to zone out all of Allegiance just now. They back off. They don't want that fight over those elementals. Just let Space Station have it. Then they back up and go back to their farm. So that's what we're seeing from ALG. It looks like they don't want to get behind early again. They're just content to go get their farm and have another fair game in the end. But Scary D under a lot of pressure here. Very, very low from Cyclone.
Cyclone not too happy about that level 1 first blood from Space Station, trying to return the favor onto Scary D with a solo kill, but instead he's got to be careful here. Homefei is waiting for the 72 transformations first before going in, but Cyclone kind of assuming that something might be up, just looking to fall back to his tower.
Cyclone's been kind of sniffing out that Homefei might be hanging around, so he plays it safe. Scary D walking up all of a sudden might have been just a bit of a bait as Weekend goes in to get a little bit of poke off on Scary D, but everybody's okay over here in the solo lane, and Space Station are one more time hanging out ready to get these mid harpies.
Weekend didn't want to keep trying to trade out those auto attacks because off of that first ability from Scary D, that does provide him with an additional physical power buff as far as his attacks are concerned against the enemy that he lands it on. So really important ability to not try and box a Camazotz into.
Space Station investing that 500 gold bounty that they get, or the first blood bounty, into some vision on the map. They got 4 wards, 2 up across the top on the solo lane side, and then 2 on the side here to try and help make sure Zapman doesn't get too aggressed. Homefei, though, committing the ultimate, recognizing Scary D is here. The sprint comes out, able to get some damage off, but Weekend placing the ultimate perfectly. But Annister's here, too. That damage pulls him right back into the damage from Homie. FA, who gets credit for the second kill of the game.
That was a beautiful taiko drums by Annister, just barely catching Weekend on the tail end right before he could look to get into the safety of his own jungle. I mean, just the ability to catch him out there, you just know the timing's impeccable.
And that's what we see from Raijin. It's what was giving him some degree of viability before, he had some of those recent buffs. His ultimate can also be used for a good bit of utility, and that's what we see Annister do, piloting it like a pro, using it instead to pull him back into his team, letting Homefei get that kill, which is a big deal. Now their mid and jungler each have a kill, and they're a little bit ahead of their lane opponents.
And that's exactly the place that Space Station wants to be, especially considering their draft. This is a draft that's not looking to take it easy in the early game. When you're running the double assassin, you are going all in from the get-go.
Weekend looks like maybe he wanted to go all in, jumping in on top of Scary D. He doesn't have the ultimate since he had to use it to save himself. Scary D, though, up into the air and able to get out of there.
Just barely coming up in time to save the life of Scary D, and that's just an unfortunate position for ALG. They look for the commit, and nothing wrong with that. Weekend's still able to get away, and his Fear No Evil will be back up pretty soon. So I'd imagine his next target to potentially be Annister in the mid lane.
Scary D didn't even have to back, though. He's still getting that farm on the right-hand side. Didn't miss out on any minion waves or anything like that, so that's a pretty big deal. So really nothing came from the gank from ALG on that side. They are at least going to come over and see if they can get in the jungle on the duo lane side. Scary D is very low. He's stuck around, and Cyclone's been recognized it, but not able to follow up. Jigs was rotating over to try and help.
Everything, I'm sure, was on cooldown right then and there for Cyclone, and it's just so frustrating, I'd imagine, as a solo laner, watching your prey get away with 10% health every time.
4 members of ALG, everyone but Cyclone's been here to try and help secure these oracles, which do end up going their way, so they'll now have vision on that gold Fury objective, something that can't be countered by the side of Space Station as they head back to parity.
I think this also really goes to show just how strong Cyclone really is in his role. It doesn't matter if you knock him down at the start of a match or midway or halfway through it. It's just, he is just so great at understanding what he can and cannot do in this solo lane role, and will immediately take any advantage that he can get as far as the matchups are concerned.
And again, Weekend will be the one dictating the pace for ALG in this game. He does have Blink, and he has his ultimate available. So look for him to go in on someone like Anderson, even potentially Zapman, but more than likely it'll be happening in that middle lane where he can start the fight and get that control off. He placed it very well to get some self-peel for himself earlier in the jungle, but now Scary D very low again in the solo side. Cyclone's been low as well, but has that heal coming. There's the ultimate from Weekend. The pin comes out as well, but Scary D once again just barely clinging to life.
And time and time again, except this time it could be Omofei with the response. Weekend doesn't have enough mana to try and contest anything here, but both him and Cyclone are just going to back to base instead. I wouldn't be surprised to see Space Station potentially aggress onto the Gold Fury pretty soon, considering that Weekend no longer has that Fear No Evil, which is probably more of a threat as far as securing objectives are concerned than Ocean's ultimate.
That is a big win. Both ultimates committed for ALG. Cyclone's been in Weekend, don't have them, but Scary D is the only one that used his. So if they were to start with the Gold Fury, they'd have an advantage there, though. Zapman will have his back up shortly. He had to use his up against Med Yankee in that duo lane as well, but that should be back up sooner rather than later, and they'll have a chance to make that happen if they so choose. Weekend just happy to get his own speed buff on that top side.
This is just such an evenly matched duo lane as well between Met Yankee and Zapman. Zapman having to play a little bit more aggressive, I would say, into Met Yankee, considering that he's on that Hu Yi. You want to try and get as much pressure in the laning phase as possible, because that's going to set up your team even more so whenever those Gold Fury pit engagements start happening. Plus, just knowing how much control Zap can have in these team fights from that AoE ultimate, it's just absolutely devastating, combining that on top of Homofase.
And I feel like this is a relatively new thing that we're seeing, or at least recent, that they're going with the Ninja tab by our AD carries rather than, I think usually it used to be the Warrior tab by. What is it about the Ninja tab that are now the direction you want to go?
This is actually more of a player preference kind of thing, but I would probably determine Ninja tab to be better in 99% of scenarios, because especially for these hunters that don't have attack speed steroids built into their kits, both Carninos and Hu Yi have a little bit slower base attack speed. So with that in mind, Ninja Tabi, on top of the stacks that they're going to build up eventually from that Devourer's Gauntlets, they'll have the power spike from the Devo Gloves. And Ninja Tabi just means that they have more in hands to work with.
ALG securing those oracles. They even started up the Gold Fury for a moment a little bit earlier just to test the response from Space Station, who are playing aggressive into the jungle of ALG, forcing Oceans back, trying to see if they can set up a pick similar to how they did last game, or at least force out some important cooldowns.
Just look at how far up Homofei is playing, really trying to keep sight on ALG, let his team know whether or not they can potentially steal away this red buff, and it will go the way of Space Station. Zapman actually going to be the one cleaning up those spoils, but Homofei, again, he's been so aggressive on this Nemesis, which we've been seeing a lot more of. And speaking of which, May Yankee barely getting away, but the dash has come through, and now without an escape, he's just cleaned up nicely from the slice and dice by Homofei.
We've been seeing a lot more aggressive play, and Met Yankee seeing a lot more Homie FA. Comes over there and helps to clean up that kill, no problem. Now sitting 2-0-1 as Met Yankee sits on the 24-second respawn timer. It looks like Nearmal is going to rotate over to try and save this tier 1, and they do back off. Rotation coming over from Oceans and Weekend as well, but they're going to back off. They recognize Zap and Homie back right up, and that was a good call too, because that could have been trouble.
But still, that T1 tower already being put down to about 30% of its life just means that Space Station are probably going to have a little bit more room to work with on that duo lane side. Wouldn't be surprised to keep seeing Homefei venturing over to the duo just because it's so easy for him to lock down Met Yankee. Met Yankee opted for the Aegis. He has purification beads available now, but when Kronos expends his dash, it's really just no escape route left.
Despite being up 3-0 on the kills, Space Station only have a little bit less than 1,000 gold lead, so it's really not as if Space Station are ahead or in control of this game despite having all the kills. It's very close, and that's what Allegiance did so well last game. Zatman starting off this Gold Fury, and I don't think anyone from Allegiance recognized it's happening. They leash it there just for the moment. This is going to give the coerce from Jigs so that they can put in even more damage. Now Neyrima rotating in just because no one's on the map, but it's not in time. Space Station sneak one away.
And the ultimate from Anderson just to make sure that they have enough damage to get it down before Neomall tries to drop the Dharmic Pillars even to look for the potential steal. Dharmic Pillars can actually pose quite a threat to a team trying to lock down an objective if you're able to catch it right on the siding.
Weekend and Ocean's playing aggressive on this side, catching out Homefei, who has to back out. So they were looking to try and get something back after giving up that Gold Fury for free to Space Station. Just when I said it, they really didn't have much of a lead. They've now pushed it up to about 2,000 in their favor, which is something they could play around with a little bit.
The only objectives really left on the map for contest are the Portal Demon and a potential T1 tower somewhere. More than likely Scary D's T1 tower, as Cyclone has already forced out a lot of the health of that T1, but it's still incredibly risky for ALG to try grouping and pushing either side right now, just considering that if they leave their Hunter alone, it could mean that he's very susceptible to Homefei.
We're seeing looks like the Mystical Mail come out from Cyclone Spin. That's something we're seeing a lot more from our solo laners now, not just because of the physical protection, but that passive is so strong as well as Homie FA rotates on in.
Just no cares in the world. Look at that aggressive pathing from Homefei, taking the super deep direction, but now it's Cyclone Spin actually recognizing that his jungler is making his way over, and same thing for Neomall. ALG, it's like they want to go in, but they're not sure if they can quite commit just yet.
It does seem as if they're waiting for the fight to be maybe a little more obviously in their favor before they commit. They don't want to take a 50-50 if they're not quite sure if they're going to be able to win it. Cyclone Spin continuing to trade out now, looking like a little bit more favorably with Scary D. Commits the ultimate, means he'll also get the heal. The pin's out, and Scary D is holding on to that ult. Finally does get it forced out, and that's what Cyclone Spin was looking for.
Doesn't want to leave any more of a risk to happen, but that just means that Cyclone Spin might potentially be able to clean this tower. No, it's going to be Jigs instead, rotating over just to make sure that ALG isn't trying to go on to this Portal Demon, which is the smart decision. When you know that your solo laner has to back, one member on your team needs to be in that area, just making sure that the objective is still up and good for a contest.
And that's what Jace did, making sure playing like a true support should come over, making sure that they don't lose too much of the tower, though it does end up taking some more minion aggro, and he loses a little bit more farm to that tower on the solo lane side. Homefei and Zatman, though, looking like they might have an engagement here onto Med Yankee, whose Aegis has already come out. The slow's coming out, but the Dharmic Pillars are enough to try and force them to back out. The Sun's Rain in, not quite enough to clean anything up.
Excellent peel there from Neomall and Weekend, dropping the Fear No Evil, covering off that chasing route in the jungle. And Neomall's Dharmic Pillars, really, the slow plus the sprint, just getting Met Yankee as far away from the situation as possible, although it will cost them their T1 tower still. Meanwhile, Cyclone is actually trying to defend the buffs on the right-hand side. It does seem as though Space Station were able to steal it away, though.
Ultimate comes out from Andenster, trying to get some damage on the Cyclone Spin. Not really able to get much out of it as Scary D and Cyclone continue to box. Just trying to clear some space for Zapman to take down the Tier 1 in mid as well. They bring it very low, but they don't quite bring it down.
Allegiance, though, already anticipating that aggression from Space Station, left 4 members underneath that T1 tower as opposed to trying to help out Cyclone. I think they could tell that Scary D is probably not going to be the one to take Cyclone down all by himself. It's actually been Cyclone getting the better end of these 1v1 trades with Scary D. And that's kind of just what you expect, at least during the laning phase from a Camazotz against an Erlang Shen.
Over on the dual lane side, Zapman face off against Neyrima and Met Yankee. Those Oracles, he is able to split them at least, so no one gets the vision over there despite being in that 2v1, so he's happy to walk away. But I want to talk a little bit over here about these mid lane builds. I know we saw a lot in EU where they were going for that High to the Urchin. Seemed like maybe not so much a big deal in NA, or is it just that they're not in that at that spot in their build yet?
I think for NA, they recognize that they're trying to prioritize damage as opposed to having that safety net of defense, because Oceans doesn't really need a High to the Urchin. He's relatively safe because of the escape that he's already permitted on his third ability. And that being considered, he doesn't need an Urchin. And is there probably a little bit more wiggle room with that, but not really looking for it either. He'd rather just have damage, and I do feel as though that's the right mindset, because although he could build an Urchin since his team is already ahead and it would be a slightly one more item, the same could be said for any damage items that he builds, and those will put his team in a nice spot as well.
Scary D getting low over here on the solo lane side. He does still have that ult available, so he still does have that emergency escape button if he ends up needing to push it. And Cyclone's been looking to try and force it out without committing his ultimate if he can. But there's a grouping from a space station on the Gold Fury, even though Scary D's also very low on the solo side. Cyclone Spin commits in, and Scary D has to give up the ultimate. Now Cyclone Spin can try and take down this tier 1 tower because Scary D has to back.
Scary D is cutting it close right now with these ultimates, because you are not entirely immune when you press 4 to go up into that ultimate for Camazotz. There is a slight period of time, very similar to Freya ult, where you're not considered up off the ground just yet, and if Scary D keeps risking it that close to the line, he might actually end up dying here pretty soon.
He does end up paying the price of his tier 1 tower, though. Cyclone Spin, despite that early first blood, he's already forgotten about it. Now he's the one taking down the tier 1 tower and freeing himself up to rotate and be a part of these team fights a little bit more than he has been so far, as Space Station established control over the Gold Fury. They got it being pulled just a little bit by Zapman, but they know everyone's here.
And Cyclone is quite a force to be reckoned with right now, actually having more, or he's out-farmed Scary D in the lane because of how often he's been pressuring him to back to base, and now Zapman actually jumping over that Gold Fury wall, looking to try and secure this one. It's already been burned down to about 50% HP, and Anister venturing over as well, keeping Neilma zoned, and Met Yankee can't get anywhere near him because of Jigs.
Good job zoning by Space Station as Zapman commits the ult to take down that Gold Fury. Now the gold lead is 3,000 in favor of Space Station. Still 3-0 are the kills, and we're 18 minutes in. But Space Station able to secure that objective a little bit better despite Cyclone's win in the solo lane.
And again, this is where Allegiance is starting to cut a little bit close. Not because the gold lead is really anything to be concerned about. That's actually very manageable when you're only approaching the 20-minute mark. It's more so that they're getting closer and closer to encountering that same situation as last game, where if 4 members die, that could potentially be game ending.
And that's something that could easily happen on a composition with 2 assassins on them, especially someone like Nemesis and Camazotz, who are capable of really just deleting characters. Cyclone Spin and Weekend trading out with Scary D and Homie Faye. Neyrima is over here in the jungle, but Jigs is right there with them, so everything's okay. Homie Faye actually backing while Scary D takes one more smack to the face.
Homie Faye doesn't really have much more of a reason to lurk around the solo. He knows that Scary D is going to be safe. Scary D has his ultimate, and with 2 members of Space Station present in the mid lane, it means that Anister and Jigs could show face in case ALG decides to get a little bit frisky on those Portal Demon.
And we saw this last game. One team fight was really all it took to set up the end of the game, really, and that was 30 minutes in. We're not quite there now, but this game does feel paced very similarly because of just how close these 2 teams are in skills. If we do have any team fight breaking out, as Zapman does successfully take down this tier 1 tower, who are we looking at to be the one that initiates for either team? Who do we have our eyes on?
It'd have to be Homie Faye, because Homie Faye picking up that blink on the Nemesis, that is the pure engagement factor in my eyes. Either that or it's going to be Scary D with the same sort of mentality. He's got the blink as well. He could also potentially be the initiating factor. These assassins, although they can deal a large amount of damage, can also take quite a bit of it as well. So whoever decides frontline there would probably be fine. Speaking of which, Zapman actually trying to defend his T2 tower, waiting for more assistance and backup from Jigs. Meanwhile, Homefe actually looking to go in now on Cyclone Spin, or Oceans, excuse me.
Yeah, they recognized the aggression in dual lane, and they tried to get aggressive over here in the solo. Ocean stayed back, though. He was okay. Scary D was the one that ended up low, but Annenster is here. He's ready to try and go in onto Cyclone Spin, get some damage off, but it's not enough. And again, Zatman was able to keep them from going into that tier 2 tower and left. The Ohm was enough to stop the dash, though, from Annenster. The beads come out, but there wasn't any more follow-up, but that's a win. Beads are on cooldown.
That was an excellent silence by Neomalt, just coming in at the last second, stopping Annenster from getting away, forcing out those beads. Realistically, I don't think that Annenster could have gotten greedy there and tried to hold on to those.
I agree. He had to make that call. Even though the follow-up wasn't immediate from ALG, with Cyclone Spin and Weekend over there, he would not want to have been locked into place for very long. So making sure that he stays safe, just waiting out that beads timer. But that's big for ALG. Annenster and Zatman have another at least 90 seconds before they have beads again.
And with that in mind, wouldn't be surprised, ALG already doing so, grouping up around that Portal Demon, trying to take their first objective of the game.
Scary D on the right-hand side, trying to loop around and slow down Cyclone Spin and Weekend in this fight, as it looks like they are trying to push the little bit of advantage they have here right now at the Portal Demon. Backing off a little bit, letting Neyrima be the front line for him, and Jigs is the one that's hanging around trying to front line for Space Station, but Space Station don't think much is happening. Annenster just backed.
The problem here for Weekend is that it's going to be really difficult for him to find an opening to where he can launch his Fear No Evil and not just catch actives. Because of the way that Space Station are delaying Allegiance's aggression, it's pretty much now or never. Weekend has to find that Blink ultimate onto either Zatman or Annenster, just one of those two, because then it would mean that ALG has a strong chance to win the team fight.
Jigs jumps in and uses the ultimate to try and start the team fight out. Wild Hunt already coming out from Med Yankee, but Homieface the one that's in the back trying to blow up Weekend, but they turn on him and take him down instead. Med Yankee getting credit for that kill. Scary D up in the air now, trying to get the return kill into Med Yankee, but he's going to have to back off. The Ohm is enough to keep any more return damage. Lockdown and follow-up from Oceans sets up the kill on the Scary D, 2 for 0 in favor of Allegiance.
And that peel by Neilma has just been absolutely insane. Not only setting up Oceans and killing Scary D, but the shutdown of Homefe. He had Weekend down to 1 HP. The shell comes out from Neilma, saves the life of Weekend, and by then, Homefe is just too close to Met Yankee, eats that auto attack to the face, and just dies.
And it's actually not even Annenster or Zatman, the one whose beads we were talking about, that end up falling. It's Homieface who goes too far forward, and the shell keeps Weekend alive, and he ends up getting turned on, or Met Yankee rather. Now ALG take the Portal Demon, come over here and take the uncontested Gold Fury, and after this, the game's all but evened up in the gold lead. Only about 1,000 separate them. The experience, though, is the real one that's dropped back down in favor of ALG. We have essentially a tie game here at 24 minutes with 3-2 in the kills.
And that's just the risk kind of involved with running double blink on these two assassins. Sure, you can find the kills and the initiation if you get the initial jump on them, but at the same time, you've also got to keep in mind you're way further ahead than what your team actually is. Annenster, Zatman, Jigs, they were also trying to catch up and funnel in through that narrow corridor, not wanting to overextend too much because they were still concerned about the AoE possibilities from Oceans, from Met Yankee, having that root, the cripples, and it's just a ton of damage between that crush.
And that's a good part of what happened there. I mean, he just was too far forward for there to really be any follow-up. But he was very close to getting the solo kill on the Met Yankee, but that shell come out at the last minute just helped him clean the life, and they were able to turn onto both him and Scary D. But as you said, Homie F8 choosing that blink over something like maybe Aegis, which could have helped him walk out a little bit more. He's chosen the initiation over keeping alive a little bit longer in the fights as that man catches out Neyrima and commits the ult.
And it's going to be the Dharmic Pillars from Neilma as well as the Silence, just trying to make sure that nobody tries to get anywhere near him. It will work out, although Neilma eating a pretty amount of damage for that one. And all that it really cost Space Station was Zatman's ultimate.
Zatman was able to lock Neyrima down, at least force him out of the engagement for a while, but because Gold Fury and Portal Demon are down, there's really not anything that Space Station could do with that tiny win in the mid lane, so it's just enough to force them back, just some poke that they're able to get, and come back in and secure their own farm. Gold Fury still 3 minutes right about from coming back up. Portal Demon still a good way from respawning as well. So I wouldn't be surprised if we see these teams go back to farming, considering just how even they are, and look for picks to try and set up this next big objective.
You never realize how crazy those Camazotz autos look. Hold that thought. The Nehemiah actually getting a ton of crazy damage put onto him yet again. Weekend, same story. Under half health as both of those members from ALG forced to retreat.
And that's another win for Space Station. Weekend and Nerimar are both very low. And even going forward, looking for more right now is Scary D. Look how deep he is. He's got Jigs there to provide him a little bit of support, but Met Yankee is swinging at this point in the game. He's not afraid to stand and fight. Andenster here as well. Dashes in aggressively, immediately following up his Ocean to put out some return damage, but the ultimate's committed from Andenster. Scary D cleans up Met Yankee and uses that ultimate to get out of there.
Meanwhile, on the right-hand side, Zetman and Homofe actually taking away that T1 tower, making sure that ALG don't have it to fall back to for the next Fire Giant dance.
And that's showing just how close and even these teams are right now. Able to take the tier 1 tower from Allegiance or Space Station, able to clean up the kill there with Scary D, but they don't give up too much. Allegiance stays safe with everyone else, at least, and back up, only losing Met Yankee, who was playing kind of aggressive.
And no surprises to see both of the solo laners actually leading top of the damage charts. It's kind of what you expect from how aggressively Scary D has been piloting this Camazotz. Now with Zetman with Jigs trying to look at this Fire Giant. Nilma already expending his dash to get away. Doesn't really feel too comfortable trying to engage this all by himself. Jigs forming up into the Dragon as Weekend's health bar just gets absolutely erased by Homofe.
Has to place the ultimate at his own feet. They will fear some evil here today as they're pushed back away from Weekend. Now it's Space Station going back to try and secure this Fire Giant, recognizing that Weekend and Nerimar don't have their ult, but Oceans still has his. Sprint comes out from Jigs and Scary D. They're ready to push forward. The call with Cyclone Spin, who gets on out, and they'll have to fall back without that Draconic form.
But Space Station still finding nothing. Cyclone Spin just walks away for free pretty much, and that's a sprint that's gone now from Jigs. They still have one more in tow. They've got Scary D's sprint, but they've just got to keep in mind that ALG have a Shell and a Horrific Emblem remaining as well. They've got to be careful with those as Scary D actually gets chunked away by Met Yankee.
Scary D won't have his ultimate for a while now as he's forced to back to try and go heal up. And another strong defense from Space Station. Despite being down just a little bit in that last engagement, they stop Space Station from being able to take the Fire Giant. They don't really give up too much in return either. And now they're the ones with the positioning for the Portal Demon, which is just about to respawn.
And neither Met Yankee or Zetman have CC immune ultimates on these Hunters. Speaking of which, ALG actually shredding away at this, completely uncontested by Space Station. Zetman actually opposite side of the map on Oracles right now.
And that's Met Yankee. I mean, he's full build at this point in the game, putting in a ton of damage onto these creature objectives. And Zetman looking to do the same thing to the Gold Fury as there's no one from Allegiance. In fact, just about everybody's backing, so he'll at least be able to take this Gold Fury to try and respond to the portal.
It's not so much the gold that's the concern about ALG securing that Portal Demon as much as it is the positioning advantage that it provides them, because now they can freely back to base after initiating a fight. As long as the members are able to get out in time, they could catch Space Station on the off guard, because if Space Station push into the jungle, I mean, they're going to have the entirety of ALG coming up right behind them, fresh from base.
Back here at just about 30 minutes are we here in game 2, and this is about where things blew up in game 1. So one team fight around the Fire Giant very clearly could spell the end. They were further forward, though, closer like to the tier 2 tower, why they were able to push in so far, but those respawn timers are starting to get long. These fights are so important. We only have 6 kills so far, so when they drop now, they'll be out of these team fights for a good while.
And that's exactly what ALG are trying to keep in mind, as Met Yankee, actually the aggressor this time on the Fire Giant, but Space Station got to be careful. They can't risk letting ALG get this into a 50-50 zone, and instead it's going to be Jigs jumping in, but already down to half health.
Ultimate coming out from Andenster, putting plenty of damage into Met Yankee, forcing out his Aegis early. Zetman able to clean it up, no problem. Fear no evil going through the team fight as Nerimar is getting punched in the face by Scary D. 1-for-0 so far in favor of Space Station, and the sprint comes out as well. Perhaps looking for a little bit more, but they decide to hang back.
Everybody thought about going in for a second, then decided better of it, and that's the right decision there. Cyclone Spin now, again, being the lone defender for ALG, already forced into his ultimate, but it might not be enough to save his life this time. Scary D seems pretty intent to try and run him down as Weekend aggresses onto Zapman.
Weekend still has his blink available, so he's lurking around trying to find a way to get in. Homie FA very low, trying to bait him in with that Nemesis shield, and once again, Space Station taking some shots from the Fire Giant, but it's Legion's really the ones who are aggressing. Cyclone Spin pushing in, as is Neruma, but they're going to have to back off. Not able to get anything really of it, but again, no Fire Giant.
It's still a win for ALG because Cyclone was able to buy enough time for Weekend to get back, show some face, and remind Space Station that Fire Giant isn't free just yet.
Speaking of Weekend, he is going with that Deathbringer in his build. His passive does give him an increased chance for crit after using one of his abilities just on his in-hand, and that Deathbringer will mean that crit smacking for all the more. So looking to try and blow up Zapman or Annister in the backline if he can catch him after that ult and get a few good smacks in.
That's kind of what he has to do. I'd be looking more towards Annister than Zapman here. Zapman probably a little bit more difficult to lock down. Jigs has been by his side practically every single moment in every single spot on the map that Zapman has been. And that's also just part of the synergy that this dual lane already had from previously playing just a lot of rank together.
All of Allegiance grouped up on this solo lane side as we again start up the Fire Giant dance. About 4,000 gold in favor of Space Station Gaming, but again, that's not going to be too big of a difference between these teams. Just looking down at the builds show that they are still very even at this point in 32 minutes, and Zapman gets this Fire Giant started up one more time to force the hand of Allegiance. They're playing the defense so patiently, though.
Seen this one before. Just as quickly as they picked it up, they already put it back down. Space Station understanding their limits and not really wanting to take too much too soon.
Jigs has been the man for Space Station to start the team fights, jumping in and then putting down that Dragon form to force ALG to back up, and it looks like that's what he's looking for again. Zapman's also been a tiny bit of initiation if he can get the stun out, but Neruma locks down Jigs on top of the crush from Oceans, who follows it up. Med Yankee very low in the backline. Ultimate, though, deletes Homie FA in favor of Ocean. Scary D is the one he'll be looking at next, as he did get the reset, but Annister able to clean up Med Yankee.
That Raiju, I believe, is actually the reason why Met Yankee died, bouncing around in the entirety of ALG. Speaking of which, Neilmon now trying to get away from Jigs as Annister goes in onto Oceans, finds the in-end to clean him up. Ultimate coming out now. Tycho Drum swinging away at Weekend.
Trying to clean up Weekend at the end of this team fight, as it has gone in favor of Space Station so far. They still have 4 members, only missing Homie FA. And Allegiance are missing Oceans and Met Yankee. Their primary damage dealers are the ones they're missing. So Space Station have almost no fear as they pull the Fire Giant down to half health. Jigs is going to be the one on zone duty. Scary D also pulls off to try and lock down the kill. The team gives up on the Fire Giant entirely to lock down Cyclone Spin, and they do so, and they're getting credit for that kill.
And that's a safe play. Now it's just Weekend. He's already on the opposite side of the map, recognizing that there's no way ALG have a chance at the Fire Giant. Just trying to get what he can, what little bit of gold is left for his team to secure before the siege starts coming out from Space Station.
Annister backs to prevent him from getting anything more than that tier 2 tower, so they do recoup a little bit of the gold that could have been lost from those objectives, but way more important are the Fire Giant buff itself that's sitting around actually the waist of all 5 members of Space Station, so even able to get it on the one who fell earlier. Is that man going to get the Gold Fury, and Space Station will be able to group up and really start pushing down these tier 2 towers, which are all exposed for ALG.
I can appreciate the attempt, though, by Cyclone to head towards the Fire Giant pit, just buy as much time as possible for ALG. It's worked out for him numerous times, so it doesn't surprise me that he'd look for it yet again, because this Fire Giant could honestly be the breaking point for this game for ALG. It all depends on the defense, and even more, all eyes on Oceans in particular, and Weekend, because Weekend can't afford to use that Fear No Evil in a escape manner. He needs to use it in a defensive but set up way.
I agree. Weekend has been getting forced into using that ultimate sort of just at his own feet to save himself several times. That's a big part of what's limiting his effectiveness here, sitting 0-1-1. Overall, there just haven't been that many kills, though, in general. Space Station playing very safely in this game so far and able to avoid that aggression. But now it's Space Station, again, with all the control in this engagement, doing the 4-1 right now. They got 4 members in mid, and they're letting Scary D split push in that dual lane side so they can pressure 2 towers at once. And ALG choose to defend on the Phoenix.
That fight right before Space Station was able to secure the Fire Giant was honestly in favor of ALG because they found the kill onto the Nemesis. It was just so unfortunate that Andister slides right in with that Raiju and just wipes out Met Yankee, who's sitting about 10% health in the very back line of the T2 tower.
No one's rotated over to dual lane just yet, as Scary D continuing to push up the minion wave and trying to split the focus of Allegiance. Allegiance aren't biting though. Finally, Met Yankee rotates over just to clear those minions as Space Station continue to push, but this is something that Oceans on Scylla is able to do very well. Clear those minion waves to make the push for Space Station harder, and someone is going to have to be taking those Phoenix shots.
This is the right decision, though, for ALG, understanding that they can take the fight underneath their Phoenix, not really wanting to push much further out of it, force Space Station to commit underneath there because it is still 2 assassins, and while they might be moderately tanky, Nemesis and Camazotz can only eat so many Phoenix shots.
And Nemesis does eventually pick up that Spirit Rope, so there is some protection. Zapman taking a big crush to the face, already brought down to about 60% HP, so he'll hang back and let that Fire Giant buff tick up a little bit. But Scary D being able to pull Met Yankee away from the fight is actually kind of a big deal, having him lock down that left side with Homie Faye lurking around too.
And Space Station making the right decision, letting Zapman actually push the wave since they want him to regen a little bit. Finding a cute little ricochet onto Cyclone Spin, and now all eyes back on that mid-Phoenix. Zap just trying to focus the objective entirely.
Unable to get to the backline, our Allegiance, so Zapman is able to put damage into the Phoenix. Weaken jumping in and forcing out the beads and Aegis from Zapman. Both those relics are on cooldown, but the Phoenix still stands, but perhaps only for the moment. Oceans commits the ult, and there was no lockdown, so no one gets hit, but Zapman still ends up falling, trapped beneath those between those Dharmic pillars. Space Station backing off.
And just another beautiful silence by Neilma, making sure that Zapman had no possibilities of escaping because he was so focused on trying to find that last auto attack to take down the mid-Phoenix. I wouldn't be surprised to see either Scary D or Homifei blink in and potentially even suicide for the objective. Both, though, just looking like they want to back off.
Med Yankee continuing to push the pressure, and Weaken is lurking around. The turn is good from Omiefe with the ultimate on the Med Yankee, but it's Scary Dude who's very low. Omiefe does clean up Med Yankee, but Weaken doesn't want to give up on this engagement just yet. The overhand slam is enough to get some damage, but Andister was here waiting in the jungle. He comes in pushing out the damage on the Weaken, who has to turn tail, and Space Station able to get one more kill back on the Med Yankee.
Weaken actually lucky that he had his Duke shoes on today because feel as though that damage from Andister would have been enough to clean him up had it not been for the first 2 ticks of that missing.
Weaken making sure to put those juke boots on in the morning, and it ends up paying out for him here. Nairmal coming over to try and stop this minion wave from getting some damage onto the tower, but what a big defense we saw from ALG. That Phoenix still up, starting to regen a little bit of health at this point now too. And when you take that Phoenix down the first time, it does respawn weaker, so that's such a big deal if Space Station had been able to take it down, but they weren't. Now ALG lurking, looking to see if someone will come over to this Portal Demon area. The call is onto Jigs, but Weaken immediately gets ulted by Homie Efe. The Taiko drums come out from Andister, trying to pull him back into the team. Jigs jumps in, so does Scary D, looking for Weaken in the backline, up into the ultimate, and trying to rein in damage, but Weaken is too safe.
It's Zapman, though, not as safe as Neilma as he gets wiped out by Zapman. And, of course, Space Station having that advantage. It's the 4v5, and so much was expended from Allegiance just trying to get away. It means that they don't feel comfortable trying to defend this Fire Giant any longer. But I feel as though that's the right call for Allegiance, although it's rather unfortunate that Neilma won't be respawning for another 40 seconds because Neilma was a large part of why Space Station was unsuccessful in locking down the mid-Phoenix.
As you predicted, Scary D unafraid to go in and tank the Phoenix because it was so low. They were able to get that mid one cleaned up, no problem. Now moving over to the dual lane side Phoenix are all 5 members of Space Station. Without Nairma here, they don't have those Dharmic pillars in their frontline initiation to try and set up this team fight or tank a little bit of damage from them. But Met Yankee and Oceans are still swinging. If they can find some damage on the Zapper Andister, they can still turn this Phoenix defense around.
They'll be up now in about 5 seconds, and the engage is on from Cyclone Spin, taunting in both Zapman and Scary D. There was such a huge crush there out of Oceans, but it's enough to back Space Station off.
The taunt from Cyclone Spin was big there to deter the aggression from Space Station, who now decide to back off. They still have the Fire Giant around their waist for another almost 3 minutes, it looks like. So they'll be able to just back up, go get the Gold Fury, get a little bit more farm off the map, or at least remove it for ALG to be able to take it so they can go back, be full health, and make one more attempt at this Phoenix, though Neyrama will be a part of the defense this time.
The problem for ALG, though, is that Space Station have all the freedom in the world to just push up and keep that mid lane pushed with fire creeps. And Allegiance are going to have to constantly be looking to defend that, which is exposing either their left or right-hand Phoenix. Probably the left side Phoenix is what Space Station is after, considering that's the better Phoenix to secure since it's furthest away from the Fire Giant. Although I can't imagine ALG really looking to contest on FG any longer.
Scary D able to successfully steal away this speed buff. Weaken unable to get anything back out of it, so Scary D is probably happy with just that little mini victory of taking the speed buff as Space Station is spread around the map, pushing up all the minion waves to try and have as much pressure onto ALG's base as possible. Only 2 members in that solo lane side, and that's where all of Allegiance are. So Jigs and Zatman are over here to able to get the Phoenix with the Coerce from Fafnir. Weaken's coming in to try and slow it down. The Fear No Evil comes out, but Zatman goes right into the air. Anister's here now, and they are able to take down this left side Phoenix with the 3-man push.
And that's a huge team fighting ultimate not available any longer for ALG. The right-hand Phoenix now being completely exposed since all the members from ALG backed off from the T2 tower that Scary D and Homefe were more than happy to take away.
They expertly split the map just now. Allegiance were unprepared for the 2-man push in duo and the 2-man push in solo lane side. They were able to take the tier 2 tower, take the Phoenix. Now they're pushing onto the final Phoenix remaining. Jigs up into his ultimate, but immediately lands inside the Dharmic Pillars and gets 80% of his HP taken away, but it's Neyrama with 100% missing as he goes back to base. Cyclone Spin now in a lot of trouble. The 72 transformations does help him back on out of there, and Homie FA getting credit for that kill. The base for ALG is under attack, but Yankee gets 2 big double kills here, actually taking out Scary D and Homie FA.
And that's actually a massive cleanup for Yankee. Might have just bought ALG a little bit more time, and indeed it has. Space Station don't want anything else to do with ALG's base, considering that, sure, they found 2 picks, but it's still a 3v3, and it's Asilla Kerninos left standing. Oceans has more than enough damage to take out at least half of one of those carries' HPs, whether it's Anister or Zetman. It wouldn't really matter because Yankee would surely find the in-hands afterwards to clean either of them up.
Space Station still take down all 3 Phoenixes despite giving up Scary D and Homie FA, so they're in a position where now when they come back in, there'll only be likely that weakened Phoenix in the mid to worry about. Oceans is the one trying to take care of these minions, so they can't get in and put damage onto the Titan, as we saw them smacking away at it just a little bit. Yankee, though, catches out Anister in the mid lane. Another big kill for Yankee, who's coming up huge for him in this endgame.
And again, this is just all Yankee's abilities on a hunter. He is just so proficient at the ADC role. It's actually incredible that he ever tried to swap over to the mid lane. Not that his mid was awful by any means. It's just that he looks so much more defined on this Kerninos and just in a physical hunter position in general.
Definitely looks comfortable on the Kerninos, and Space Station cannot be comfortable with how much damage he's putting out in the late game. It's a real problem for him to try and deal with, but despite Yankee's strong performance so far, 3 Phoenixes have been taken down. That mid Phoenix did just respawn, but it'll be in a weakened state. Easier for Space Station to take down as the Fire Giant spawns in 5 seconds, and Space Station are grouping around it, but it looks like ALG want to defend this time since Anister is still sitting on a 15-second respawn time.
You know, the games are getting pretty intense when the carries are starting to pick up those elixir of defenses. Actually, 2 on the board right now. Yankee with 1 and Homefe with the other. Not to mention that 3K power pot from Scary D, considering that he's already relatively tanky.
ALG taking advantage of their power play by starting up the Fire Giant, already down to half AP, but Yankee does take a smack from the Fire Giant. Jigs is in, but Oceans has his ultimate available. It's enough for Allegiance to take their first Fire Giant of the game as Space Station has to back off. Anister could not be a part of that engagement to try and help contest the objective.
And of course, with that in mind, Space Station need to be a little bit more careful because this is an evenly matched game.
Yes.
Even with 2 of their Phoenixes being down, ALG still have the advantage technically because that's a 5-man strong team of Fire Giant, and that is an excellent late game composition to be running it.
Space Station does still have 3 towers up on the map and all 3 Phoenixes, so ALG will have a little bit more to push through than Space Station would, making it easier for Space Station to mount a defense. But this is huge from ALG. All 3 Phoenixes were down. Space Station was basically in their base, and they defended several times, able to get the Fire Giant, and now they're the ones who can at least slow down Space Station's aggression, if not move into the driver's seat themselves.
This is going to give ALG the opportunity to actually have their Phoenixes respawn, and that to me is probably the most important part, because should 1, 2, or even 3 members of ALG wipe, just knowing that those 3 Phoenixes will be respawned means that it'll be a little bit more difficult than last game for Space Station to look for the end. As long as at least 2 members are alive and at least one of them can put out damage, I think that ALG will be able to fend off their base.
And again, this game is so important. This set is so important for both of these teams. ALG sitting down at the bottom with 2 splits and 1 loss. Being able to get 1 more split off Space Station, move up to 3 points, is just so much better than giving up 3 points to Space Station and letting them move up towards the top of NA. So this will help determine, especially with Season 5, where we're only going to be going to 6 teams, who is going to be closer to that important 5th and 6th spot, and who will be closer down to 7th and 8th, and Allegiance trying to make sure it's not them.
And for Space Station, there's just so many high expectations for this team. And again, just trailing back to what we were discussing at the start, and even what was brought up on the analyst desk, these are 5 very established players for each of their roles, trying to come together now and find that synergy that they were kind of missing out on in their first set debut. And that's just expected. It's understandable for 5 members that are kind of new to working together to put everything back in. For Scary D and Zatman, I think that the transition that they've been making since joining Space Station has been an excellent performance for them.
And this is what can be sometimes so frustrating about supporting ALG if you're one of their fans. You know, with big time games like this up against Space Station, they show up in both games and they look like someone who can hang with the big boys anytime, but then when they play against some of those lower end teams, they don't always show up consistently there either. So ALG needs to come out and show here in this game against Space Station with the Fire Giant for 1 more minute that they can take it to some of the bigger teams in North America. Tier 1 tower in mid does fall, and Allegiance look to push down the Tier 2 tower in mid as well. Homie Faye and Scary D, though, are looping around the back end of the team fight. They can't afford to go in, though, because Oceans and Cyclone Spin saw it out. They're going to come over to the Tier 2 now in solo and look to keep on pushing.
This is the right decision for ALG. Make that Phoenix, or make that Titan as weak as possible in case they are able to find a potential team wipe onto Space Station. Also wanted to just take away that Portal Demon in case this T2 Siege ends up being a little bit more of a brawl out. Then they can at least come back in fully refreshed. But it seems as though they're more focused on keeping the fire waves out of their base, and successfully so. Fire Giant will be wearing off pretty soon here, so it's understandable that they would choose to back off now, not wanting to risk anything just yet when the FG buff is about to wear off.
Instead, want to come back and try and establish some position around the Fire Giant, since the Fire Giant buff has just fallen off, and only a minute or so until the Fire Giant comes back up himself again, makes himself available to be taken down by these late game AD carries that are swinging so hard. Tier 2 in the solo lane side, very low at this point. Jigs putting on a defense, as is homie Fa. The Ohm is enough to force him out. Weaken ulting over the wall to try and create some space, and he does. They clean up that Tier 2, but now Weaken's ultimate won't be available if the fight happens soon.
But the problem is there won't be a fight happening anytime soon. Instead, Space Station, understanding they just lost their tower, kind of back off instead. But I'm not sure anybody from Space Station is even going to be near enough by the time this Fire Giant respawns for fending it off from Allegiance. Allegiance has so much burst potential, and I know the Twitch chat's probably still shouting about an NA ult right now, but if you paid attention to that placement of the Humbot's ultimate, the Fear No Evil wasn't meant to catch anybody in it. It was meant to push people off of that tower. That was why we saw that ultimate coming out from over the wall. ALG just wanted to clean up that last remaining T2.
And they do end up cleaning up that Tier 2, and Space Station do end up getting established or showing presence here before the Fire Giant is able to be started for ALG. So one more time, 50 minutes into the game, we see one more Fire Giant dance coming out. And now with all 3 Phoenixes exposed for both teams, this very well could determine the winner of our game. Remember, all the Phoenixes for ALG are going to be weakened. Space Station will not have too hard a time pushing through those if they win the fight handily, and ALG have all three exposed for them.
This is basically a reset game for Allegiance now. Space Station were right on the cusp of closing it out, but unsuccessful thanks to Met Yankee, and now with ALG starting up the Fire Giant, it's going to be Jigs, first one in front of all the members of ALG, forcing them back off of that Fire Giant, and they're getting some great poke out onto Neilma.
Jigs giving up a lot of free poke in that engagement. Nothing really committed from ALG, so they're happy to do it. Neirima, though, also taking some poke himself in that last engagement. Just like last game, though, ALG have stuck around long enough for this game to come down to just one fighter. It certainly feels that way. The game's not over yet, so it's impossible to say. But now Space Station are the ones pushing forward a little bit more, and Allegiance have given up their positioning around the Fire Giant.
The scoreboard might only read 12-7 with 19 kills and 51 minutes and climbing, but the tension has just been so high throughout this match the entire time. There have been a lot of little moments of members getting poked out from either side and just so much resetting, reforming, and just recognizing that these players are playing with so much discipline. It's really quite a sight.
It's been a very evenly matched game, and ALG really showing up here against Space Station, which again we said is just loaded with star power. So is ALG, of course, but maybe their record doesn't always indicate it, despite how talented we know these players to be. But again, it's Space Station the ones with the control, and Zapman looping back around. He's the one that'll be able to start it out. Stun from Jigs on the Neirima, just making sure to keep that poke going on him so he can't come in.
For Homefe, all that it's about is probably trying to get his ultimate off onto Oceans, but that's going to prove to be an incredibly difficult task. Same thing for Scary D. Neither of these assassins really having an opening to get anywhere near Oceans. Just look at that grouping from Allegiance, and now it's actually Jigs getting CC'd out like hell and nowhere to go. He's already dead.
5v4 now in favor of Allegiance. Jig just coming a little bit too far forward. The Ohm from Neirima enough to keep him locked down, and we can commit that ultimate so that they can isolate him and take the kill. Now Allegiance with the power play. They move forward, start up the Fire Giant, and Space Station gonna need to make a big defense here if they want to keep their chances alive. Stun comes out from Zapman on the Cyclone spin. Dharmic Pillars, though, are enough to bring Scary D very, very low. He goes in, though, and Anderster cleans up the kill into Oceans. Now Scary D looking for Med Yankee, but the shell comes out, and Anderster cleans that one up. Now it's 2 for 0. Make that 3 that cleaned up for Space Station as Homie FA takes Neirima, and they start pushing down the mid lane.
With only Weaken and Cyclone Spin remaining and the ultimate backup already from Nemesis, Cyclone has been slowed down. Anderson trying to catch up. Same for Scary D. Both members just looking to tank up as much of this Phoenix as possible. But now that they have creeps available, actually, no, that's Allegiance's creep standing underneath there, archering Zapman in the back. I thought for a second that might have been for Space Station until I saw the red, but still, there is a minion wave available for Space Station, and I'm pretty sure that's going to be the game.
Only Weaken making and Cyclone Spin available here to try and defend. The Fear No Evil does come out from Weaken, but he gets blown up immediately by Anderster. Now it's 4 members just to get Cyclone Spin, trying to put in the DPS onto the Titan. They have it down below half health. Cyclone Spin trying to keep their hopes alive, but they cannot. Space Station end up picking up 2 wins.